You know, I didn't wake up one day and just decide that I wanted to sue the government. They threw my son out of school, my most vulnerable child, and I demand justice for Thorn. It is long since time that we as parents, Christians, and as a church make our voices heard, stand up to our government, and demand justice for those who cannot advocate for themselves. You know, Thorn didn't ask to be autistic. He has no political agenda. He has no idea what hit him when he was 2 years old receiving his vaccines. He just knows the trauma of living in his own skin, being nonverbal and trying not to destroy everything that stands in his path because nothing and no one can understand what he's trying to say. That is, until a few years ago, when his teachers, therapists, and psychologists at Creekside, Monroe Bosse's One, and Fairport started to figure out how his brain works. Thorn is an artist. He's a musician. He's me. He has a brain that is both technical, like an engineer or a lawyer's, as well as being artistic. So who knew that such skill sets are housed in the two sides of the brain, left and right? Who knew that if you enter on the side that works more easily for a person, that you can cross over to get to the other side? For Thorn, that means in order to teach him the alphabet, you have to sing it to him. Okay? Now, prior to attending Creekside, Thorn had become the scourge of the Penn Yan School District. At just 8 years of age, he had figured out how to use his cute countenance, irresistible smile, and an engaging personality to cause the women who worked with him to do his bidding. Much to the consternation of his principal and his former kindergarten principal, ARC executive Deb Fabris-Coons. Thorn is really fast and has an incredible ability to manipulate his environment to meet his needs. At Penn Yan schools, that meant playing his teachers and aides until they let down their guard, and then finding that right moment to bolt for the door and hit the fire alarm, sending the entire school spilling out of the building. Thorn's actions caused the Penn Yan school to decide that they were not up to teaching the disabled, and they terminated their program for such and outsourced that function as a direct result of Thorn Sterling Schwartz. The principal told me that he knew the school was violating Thorn's rights by sending him home, but that Penn Yan had never had a student as severe as Thorn, and that they could not screw all the doors shut at the school like we do at home, and that they just had to send him somewhere else to get schooled. Hence, Creekside starting about 4 years ago. Mind you, it was not easy despite his specialized training. The school district caused us to transport Thorn to school every day, which lasted less than a year. He's a Houdini when it comes to restraints, and on the second day in a row that he figured out how to escape his 5-point harness in the back seat, overcome the child safety locks, and nearly exit the vehicle on a New York State thruway at 70 miles an hour, I demanded that the district take over his transportation. That required the purchase of a school vehicle and the employment of 2 employees, one to drive and the other to make sure that Thorn did not jump out of the vehicle while it was moving down the road. Meanwhile, Thorn kept growing, taller and taller, with longer legs which he could run faster and faster, stronger and stronger, with arms with which he could smash things harder and harder, meting out justice to that which would not do his bidding. Flat screen TVs, windows, windshields, lamps, kitchenware, microwaves, washing machines, dishwashers, refrigerators, and toilets, all paying the ultimate price for not speaking Thorn's language. The slamming sound alone was giving Thorn's cohabitants a form of PTSD, and our bodies were shutting themselves down. I could hardly function enough to earn a living and keep the family functioning. My wife paying the greatest sacrifice, being the one primarily attached to our son 24/7. But Creekside was on, unbeknownst to us. They had figured out how to use the PECS system, It's PECS system of little pictures of objects which they Velcro to a notebook in order to communicate with Thorne. How brilliant! They'd found the one thing Thorne could not resist. A handy-dandy little notebook, just like Steve uses in Blue's Clues. Thorne, having watched all 6,000 episodes 3 million times at high volume, having chosen Blue as his lifelong companion. And no, you cannot do anything that you want to do, or you will get arrested. They lie to our kids in that programming, you know. So their success was, as I said, unbeknownst to us. For while Thorne excelled at school, he continued to live at home life as usual. That meant that he monopolized all of the TV screens in the house with his ADD, moving continuously from one room to the next with Blue's Clues playing on all the TVs and his device simultaneously at high volume. He had no structure to his schedule, never ate full meals, choosing instead to graze continuously, wiping food-soiled hands all over everything in the house, doorknobs, appliances, furniture, and yes, even us. 2 years ago, it got so bad I could not take it anymore and demanded a meeting with the school and his therapist and teachers. I respectfully demanded that they stop lying about Thorne's progress, meeting his educational goals, keeping him from being considered for physical placement. I was done with being a punching bag for a boy whose condition was beyond hope. They looked at me like I was a slime ball father. They told us that Thorne was a model student and that he was communicating well. I turned to the principal and, while pulling his arm, told him, "This is the only communication I have had from my son." I thought they were talking about the wrong student altogether. Thorne had figured out how to have it both ways. Lots of young, pretty women demanding compliance at school for whom he would perform, while having his good old-fashioned rodeo at home with mom, dad, and older sisters. Once we learned that, it was over, because the school figured out how to bring school home. So we as a family received coaching so that we could emulate the teachers and therapists from school, utilizing their techniques to get control of Thorne at home and settle him down, such that we could feasibly cohabit with him. That process took about a year to be realized, and going into last summer, Thorne's behaviors had improved so much at home, I decided it was time to start restoring our home from the damage that he had done. I repaired the holes in the drywall, I painted the rooms, installed pieces of trim he'd torn off the wall, and finally was starting to figure out how to replace the solid hardwood kitchen cabinets that he'd torn apart. Time is always limited, and as summer was about to pass us by, we left for vacation. Thorne going to camp at Rotary's Camp Onsiawa on Seneca Lake, a life-saving time for the families of our most disabled kids to get a break from the continuous onslaught that is experienced 24/7 with so many of these kids. Upon our return from vacation, everyone went back to school with high hopes of what the future held. Thorne's condition was so improved, I had even voiced that I could actually finally imagine living with him for the rest of our lives. And then it hit hard. The school sent a notice that Thorne had to be fully vaccinated or would not be allowed to continue to attend Creekside. My wife showed me the notice, and I told her there was obviously a mistake. She just needed to resend the doctor's exemptions from the vaccines to the school. She followed up and was told that the school was denying his exemptions and that Thorne had only days left to be in school. Are you kidding us? He can't be vaccinated, and there's no way we can survive his not being in school. Our lives are just returning to the closest thing to normal we've known in a decade. And now they give us a week's notice and just throw him out of school. I was furious. My sanctification started 50 years ago with overcoming anger. If there's one emotion that's easy for me to act on a stage, it's anger. It comes way too easily for me. So in this case, I decided to use it righteously. On a Sunday morning, while waiting for the church service to begin, having transported one of my daughters who was serving that day, I sat in a chair in the nursing mother's room and drafted a lawsuit against the government. My first act of worship that day. One of the anchors at News 10 referred to that action as being what Christ would have done. She got it. Thorne has regressed in a major way as a result not being allowed to attend school. It has been almost impossible to cohabit with him, and we as a family are exhausted. How long can we sit by as individuals, as a people, as a church, while the government continues to strip us of our rights as parents to raise our children in a way that is best for them? How long can we let billionaire forces bribe our elected leaders and cause them to line their pockets with money while the most vulnerable in our midst suffer? Too long we have been silent, beaten down by those who abhor our beliefs and attempt to force theirs on us. We are the people, and we the people need to stand up, find our voices, and demand that our elected leaders hear us and protect their constituents, like Thorne, who needs to be back in school. Just last spring, I finished my studies at Northeastern Seminary on the Roberts Wesleyan campus. I made a comment in one of my very last classes about how ineffectual the modern-day church is at influencing the culture. Professor Elizabeth Gerhardt responded, "Oh, I disagree, Carl," and then said that the church has a huge impact when it speaks. I pondered her words, and she is right. The church can hugely impact our culture, but it must find its voice in order to do so. It cannot sit silently on the sidelines while billionaire forces bribe our elected leaders into doing their bidding at the expense of our losing our freedoms to parent our kids and raise the next generation to be God-fearing and hardworking citizens. So, this is the challenge we face this day. Thorne has court coming up February 21st in Yates County. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Judge Daniel Doyle has been appointed to his case. Many of you are aware of Judge Doyle and some of his rulings. There was today a motion to be argued in the afternoon by the attorneys trying to get Thorne back to school. And I was in first Syracuse today and then Rochester and driving all over the place. But our attorney, Patty Finn, is here with us tonight, and I'm asking her to come up and tell us what we learned about Thorne's case this afternoon.
Hello, everybody. I know so many of you, and it's really great to be here. Anyway, today I was driving to court, and I got a phone call from the judge. And I thought, well, that's odd. And turns out Thorne is back in school. Praise God, and thank you. And I should tell you, judges don't normally do that. Usually I throw myself and beg and all these other things, but we attacked the regulations. They're completely unconstitutional. This is not about religion, more about medical exemptions. And I used your video on the floor, Mr. DiPietro, and it was very effective. And Carl had done a lot of the work. So anyway, we won. Now, on the 21st, please come because there's more work. Even though Thorne is back in school, we're going after the regulations as unconstitutional.
Yes, please come out on the 21st because a win for Thorne is a win for our family. I will not rest until we have a win for every child in this state. Please come out and support this thing. God bless you. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.